Hello, welcome to week 3. This should be the week 3 I was absent, what did I miss video for English 11. I first want to start off by saying I am so sorry for not recording a video for week 2. Last week was really crazy, coming off the first week of school, and not only do I teach English 11, but I also do English 10, and I'm teaching Avid, and I coach volleyball after school, so it's been a very crazy couple weeks. So I'm hoping to kind of get more on top of things so that we can have these videos ready to go at the beginning of the week. So if you are absent, you can watch them. And this video in particular will be helpful for my 5th and 6th period English 11 classes on V days because you might be able to tell by the sound of my voice, I am sick. I got a cold over the weekend. It's just a cold, nothing else. And I've been resting all weekend, and I should be good to go and be back to see you on Wednesday. But I will be gone on Monday, the 20th, tomorrow, Monday the 20th. So look at this video if it's helpful for you to kind of figure out what exactly we're doing. I know the sub will do their best. So this is for week 3. I'm going to hop over to Canvas to show you what that looks like for this week. We have Google Slides, week 3. Again, if you are, I've had a few people with schedule changes that just joined us. Google Slides are going to be our digital version of a notebook for English. So this is going to be your main source of points in this class. So this week we have week 3. If you were in my 5th and 6th period class, there's an activity that I got to do with my 4th period class on Friday because I saw them more last week. And so we will be catching up where we left off with that. So we're going to take all those things that we learned about with short stories and the different literary elements in reading like a reader versus reading like a writer. And we're going to put that to the test with an activity the sub will have for you. So that link to that story is right here. We are also starting a new unit. It's our first unit, and it's my favorite thing to teach ever in terms of books. It is called Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. So the link for a digital version of the book is right here, and I will talk about what that'll look like in terms of how you will be reading the book, but there's a link here, and you can even click under resources and see that there's another one right here. So anything that has to do with our nonfiction unit, I'm going to put in this resource folder as well. One other thing, I updated the extra credit section announcement thing. I turned it into an actual assignment. So when you are ready to get that extra credit, you should be able to upload what you need to. And here is what you need to submit for 10 points and what you need to submit to get the full 15. So that's all on Canvas, but I'll go back to the slides. So week 3, this is kind of the schedule for this week. Of course, we know with school and teaching and just what happens in life, things might change. So when you're looking at this video, some of this might change, but for the most part, this is what we should be doing. I'll let you take a second to read that. Okay, to start, we're going to have a warm-up writing prompt. So this is a quote from Nelson Mandela. He says, "If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart." So I want you to look at that quote, read it again, and I want you to respond to this question. What do you think Nelson Mandela means? What is he trying to say in this quote? So give me your best shot at telling me what you think. Okay, so after responding to that prompt, this again is just for my 5th and 6th period class. 4th period, we already did this activity, so you can skip past this. And the thing about this, I'm not going to really explain it in this video because it's something that we have to do in class. It's a group activity. So if you are watching this and you are also absent on Monday, don't worry about it. You can just skip past this. Okay. So if you were in class on Monday for B-Day, we would have a break after that activity. So officially, welcome to our nonfiction unit. We're going to kind of talk briefly about what it actually means to look at nonfiction texts. So first off, what is a genre? I've kind of used that word a few times with some things we did last week. A genre is just simply a category of a text, different categories of text. So when I was talking to you about the Libby app with the extra credit option, I showed you that you can change when you're looking at what you want to find for books. You can search by genre, which is by a category of a text. So, for example, there are many, many different genres in writing and things that you can read, whether they're books or other stuff. But the big four that are in English literature, in English classes in particular, are nonfiction, fiction, poetry, and drama. So these are genres in and of themselves, and then we can take those and break them down into subcategories, subgenres. So with nonfiction, you'll find things like biographies and autobiographies and memoirs and a ton of other stuff that I couldn't fit all on this slide. With fiction, you'll find things like sci-fi, realistic fiction, fantasy, historical, mystery, romance. With poetry, you'll find things like sonnet, haikus, narrative, epics, and drama. You'll find things which I talk about a lot, musicals and films and plays and TV shows and animation. So this is definitely not an exhaustive list, but this is to give you an idea of where we're going to be looking at. So we are in a nonfiction unit, and we're going to be looking specifically at an autobiography. So let's learn some definitions of some terms really quick. The term nonfiction means writing or cinema that is about facts and real events. So the difference between nonfiction and fiction is that fiction is about real things that really happened in real life. Fiction is stories that are made up. They can be inspired by real life or things that we experience in real life, but fiction is not true stories. They are made up stories. Within fiction, we can find things like biographies, which are a written history of a person's life. An autobiography, the biography of a person narrated by him or herself. Or a memoir, a narrative composed from a personal experience. So for example, to give you a difference, to show you the difference between these three things, a biography is if I were to write a story, if I were to write a book about my husband's life, that is a biography. If my husband was to write a book about his own life, that would be an autobiography because it's about him and he's the one writing it. If it's a memoir, it can either be about yourself or it could be about a different person. But a memoir, the difference is it's not an entire person's life. It's just kind of a snapshot. It's a very specific part of their life. And that could be 2 weeks of their life. It could be 4 years. There's not really a specific time frame on that. It's just that it's not an entire life of a person. So with Trevor Noah's book, it is an autobiography, although it probably is more so an autobiographical memoir because he's not dead yet. He's still alive. So it's just the first part of his life. So what I want you to do is you're going to pause this video and you're going to go to the slides and you're going to click on this video. This is a crash course video. If you're familiar with The Fault in Our Stars and Paper Towns, you should know who John Green is. He wrote those books, but he also has this channel on YouTube called Crash Course. It's super helpful for lots of things. And we're going to look at his video called How and Why We Read. So I want you to pause this video. You are going to watch it. And then after you watch his video, you are going to go to this slide and tell me, write down at least one thing that you learned or thought was interesting from this video in how he talks about why and how we read. So go ahead, pause my video and watch the crash course video. Okay, so I'll be excited to see what you said about that, but something I want to recap for us is that John Green said in the video, reading is always an act of empathy. It's always an imagining of what it's like to be somebody else. And that is true whether you are reading nonfiction or fiction. I would say by and large, unless you're reading like a book about how to build something, for the most part, stories are about people. They're about characters, right? We talked about that last week. And so whether it's a true story or not, reading is always an act of empathy. We're always trying to understand a different person's perspective and point of view. And that's what we're going to do, or what we're going to try to accomplish with this unit. So what I want you to do is you're going to pause this video and I want you to spend at least 20 minutes. You're going to click on these links. There's 4 different links. I believe some of them are videos and some of them are articles. if I can remember correctly when I made this. So you're going to spend some time looking at each one of those links, and as a cumulative part of your research and looking at these things that I'm giving you, I want you to write down 5 things that you learned about apartheid. We're going to talk more about apartheid in a little bit, but I want you to just do your own exploring, because some of us might be really familiar with what it is, and some of us might not know anything, and that's totally fine. We're going to eventually figure out all that we need to know about it, but apartheid is a huge part of Trevor Noah's book and his life growing up in South Africa. So I want us to spend some time trying to learn a little bit about it. So take 20 minutes, pause this video, go on these links, and write down right here on the right 5 things that you learned. It could be any 5 things out of all of these links. So go ahead and do that. Okay, so that should have been day 1. For my B day people, that would have been Monday. For A day people, which is 4th period, that would have been Tuesday. So this is day 2, either Wednesday or Thursday, depending on your schedule. So let me tell you what this unit is going to look like, the kind of the key things that we need to know. So this is the book. It's amazing, it's fascinating, and it's a hilarious autobiography about Trevor Noah growing up in South Africa during apartheid. If his name kind of sounds familiar, it's probably because you've seen him on TV or social media at some point. He hosts The Daily Show, and he's a comedian, so he's got several comedy specials on Netflix. He's hilarious. He's very funny, and the way that he tells his life story, he does it through his comedic voice. So I guarantee you, you're going to laugh and find a lot of the things really funny that he talks about. I would like 100% guarantee that you're going to be entertained reading this book. And I don't say that lightly. So that's the book. And as we go through this unit and we're working on the different skills connected to our standards, we're going to answer these 2 essential questions. To what extent is our identity shaped by culture and society? And how does empathy change the way that we view others? So where are you actually going to read the book? How do you get your hands on one? So I have a digital PDF copy. It's also linked on Canvas, like I showed you. The thing with this PDF, last year, you could just Google Trevor Noah Born a Crime PDF and it would pop up, no problem. But it kind of seems like they're trying to take the PDF off the internet, but I have a version of it saved onto my drive. So the link that I give you on Canvas is going to link it to what's saved into my drive. Luckily, I saved it. So most of us are going to be using a digital copy because there's not enough physical copies in the library. But if you would like to have a physical, tangible, hard copy, well, it's paperback, you can go to the library and check one out. I think we actually have more than 8 copies. I need to check with Miss Bazzizo on that, but there are copies. I also have 2 or 3 copies in my classroom, so if you would like to borrow one of mine, you can tell me that. Or if for some reason we're completely out of the physical copies in the library and in my room, I would be willing to print out the chapters for you. You just need to communicate that to me if we're completely out. Another option, and it is, hear me, not required whatsoever. It's on Amazon and it's pretty cheap. So if you want to buy your own copy, you can totally do that. But that is not required or expected. That's just information that might be helpful if you prefer to highlight and mark up your books like I do. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to split up the reading. We're definitely going to be doing a lot of reading in class. I have the Audible version, the audiobook version of the book. So you'll get to hear Trevor, whenever we read it in class as a whole group, you'll hear him reading it in his own voice, which is just always the best. And then I'll probably have us read, silently to ourselves from time to time in class. And then there might be times where you have to read at home, but it's not going to be exhaustive or overwhelming. So we'll talk about that as we get closer to starting it. Okay, so in terms of assignments, we have a couple. There are 2 that I'm going to show you that are things that we'll kind of chip away at as we go through the book, and that is golden lines and Patricia's advice. So I'll show you that in a second. There's going to be a few other things that we do week to week that just depend on what week it is. And then we're going to have a final project. And what I will say is that these two things, golden lines and Patricia's advice, you need to make sure that you stay up on those because they're going to greatly, greatly help you with the final project. There's nothing worse than having to read a whole book and then you have to go back and hunt for stuff when you're completing a paper or a project. It's just the worst. So I'm trying to build in something that will help us keep track of it as we go, so it's a lot less stressful when it comes to creating our final project. So we're going to start reading this week, but more so starting with prepping. Okay, so what are golden lines? I briefly touched on this when we did our learning stations, but I want to give you kind of a better description of what they are. So golden lines is a line, or sometimes it can even be a small passage, like a couple sentences, that really stands out to you. It could stand out to you for multiple reasons. You empathize with what is being said. It makes you think differently about something in a way you never would have thought of before. Or sometimes the writing itself is just amazing. And what I will say about golden lines is that they are kind of subjective to your perspective and to who you are as an individual. So you can find golden lines in any type of writing. If the writing exists, if there's writing to look at, you can find it. So that includes movies and TV shows too, and I'll show you examples. So this is a book by Jason Reynolds called Look Both Ways. He said he lived in his own world, but it was a world full of windows that everyone could see into. When I read that book, that was a golden line that stood out to me. If you're a Marvel fan and you watched WandaVision, I'm sure you remember this line. Vision says to Wanda, "What is grief if not love persevering?" That is absolutely a golden line. So you can think about them as being quotes that people will share or quote back that are very memorable. The House on Mango Street. But I think diseases have no eyes. They pick with a dizzy finger. Anyone, just anyone. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. Obi-Wan. So they're very memorable, quotable things that we say frequently. But again, it's kind of subjective to your perspective and point of view as an individual. So what we're going to be doing with this when we read the book, there are lots of really great lines, golden lines in Trevor's book. So you're going to keep track of that. And I'll show you at a later time how to do that and everything. And I'll try to build in time in class as well for you to pause and think about it. But we're going to be keeping track of those things. So you'll cite it, the page number and chapter, the line itself, and then any thoughts that you want to remember about it. Okay, so Patricia's advice. Patricia is Trevor Noah's mom, and she is a huge part of the book. She's a huge part of his life. She'll probably be one of your favorite people that he talks about in the book because she's definitely mine. I would love to meet her someday. So she gives him lots of words of wisdom and advice throughout the book, and we're going to try to do our best to collect these via a Google Doc that looks almost identical to the Golden Lines one. So you'll give me where it is in the book, the quote itself, and any thoughts or questions that you might have about it. So we'll talk about that more later. Okay. So let's do some kind of background information on Trevor and where he's from. So he is from South Africa, and to give you some perspective and maybe even just review, depending on how much of this you already know, Africa, for one thing, is not a country. It is a continent with countries, and it's huge. This image gives you an idea of just how big it is. According to the statistics of whoever put this together, the space that Africa has, like how big that continent actually is, it can fill China, the US, and Europe. It's really, really big. And there's a ton of different countries. If you think about like how America is one country, but there's many different states, it's kind of the same idea. So Africa is one continent with many different countries. And then within the countries, obviously, there's cities and provinces and all that stuff. But anyway, this is a map of all the different countries in Africa. And Trevor is from South Africa, which is down at the southern point. So what I want you to do, you are going to take a few minutes and click on this link to the map of South Africa. It's just like Google Maps. And I want you to kind of zoom in, zoom out, scroll around, and just kind of make some observations about the topography and just anything that you notice when you're looking at South Africa as a country. So go ahead and pause the video and do that for a couple minutes. Okay, so you should have kind of explored the map of South Africa a little bit. Here are some things we need to know in terms of just the country itself. The population is about 50.7 million people. There, I don't know if that was a typo. 54 sovereign countries. In South Africa alone, there are 11 official languages. And I don't know if you know this, but most countries have like one or two, maybe three. 11 is a lot. So that tells you kind of the diversity of this country. I don't even think, I might be wrong, but I don't think America, the United States, I don't think we technically have an official language. If we did, it would probably be English, but most countries do have an official language, and South Africa has 11. There are 3 capitals in South Africa. You can see them circled here, and they were all deemed capitals for different reasons and different purposes. So Trevor grew up in a township called Soweto, and I included a map so that you could see approximately how far away it is from Johannesburg. If you've heard anything about South Africa, I'm sure you've heard the town Johannesburg mentioned before, because it's a very popular, well-known town, and it's about a 34-minute drive. So that would be like if we drove from West Salem to Monmouth Independence, roughly. So not super far away. The population of Soweto itself is 1.3 million, which is way bigger than Salem. I think Salem is like not even 200,000 people. And an important historical note about Soweto is that it was created in the 1930s as a way to segregate Black people from white people via their homes. They decided to build this city and move all the Black people there as a way of segregation, which we learned about with apartheid was crazy institutionalized segregation and discrimination. So what I want you to do is write down what you know about these terms: empathy, marginalized, and heritage. Write down anything that you know or can remember. If you don't know what these words mean, just say, I don't know, but, and give me your best guess. So go ahead and take a minute and do that. Okay, so something else I want to talk about before we get into reading the book is that we need to take notes as we read, because if we don't, it's going to be extremely difficult to try to like comb through all the information and everything that we read to work on our final project. And if you choose to go to college someday, this is going to be a skill that you really need. So I would recommend a color-coded system. If you have a physical copy of the book, either like printed out or maybe just a physical copy from the library, you could use, if you're able to write on it because it's your own copy, not the library's, I would use highlighters. If not, like some sort of colored sticky note would work really well. If you have the PDF and you save the PDF to your computer, you should be able to edit it. It might be different on Chromebooks, I'm not quite sure, but I know on MacBooks you can edit it. So either way, we'll be taking notes, and just to give you an idea of what I did when I read the book is I did a color-coded system. So anything that had to do with Trevor's mom, I highlighted orange. Any golden lines I found, I highlighted yellow. Anything that had to do with the history of South Africa or apartheid in general, I put in pink. And then anything that had to do with Trevor's perspective, his thoughts, his reactions to things happening in his life, I put in green. But again, I want you to take notes in whatever way is helpful for you. These are just some ideas. Okay, so this week we are going to try to finish chapter 1. Thankfully, because I have the audiobook version too, it tells me approximately how long it'll take to read the chapter, and it said for this one 33 minutes. So we're going to try to break it up. The other thing I want to say before we start reading it is that the book has some language in it. It is, I would assume, nothing you haven't heard before, and I would rate it nothing that's like above PG-13. It doesn't happen all the time. He doesn't use the language in every single book, but there's a few cuss words that he uses, so just be aware of that. But for the most part, it's really great, and it's nothing to be concerned about. So after reading the first part of chapter 1, you are going to take a minute, and in these slides, this is a table that you can edit, you are going to compare and contrast the 3 different churches that Trevor and his mother attend. You're going to describe to me, what does he say about Black church, white church, and mixed church, and then if there's anything that they have in common, I want you to write it down in this column. So go ahead and do that. Another question we have for chapter 1 is, I want you to describe what we know so far about Patricia, about Trevor's mom. Tell me, how does he describe her to look? What are the things that she says to him? What does she believe in and care about? How does she treat Trevor? So that would be the second question. What is their relationship like as mother and son? So based off of what we have read so far, I want you to answer those questions. Okay, the last thing for week 3 we have is First Chapter Friday. And the cool thing about this is that it's you'll be able to still look at it even if you're absent on this day, the last day of the week for your schedule. So this week we have Long Way Down. I have 2 copies that I'm showing you. The one on the right is the original copy by Jason Reynolds, and then the one on the left is the graphic novel version that they came out with just this last year. So the original version is actually a verse novel, which means that the whole book is written in poetic form. So every single page is like just a couple sentences because they're poems. So every page is a different poem, but all together they weave and create their own story. And the story is about a young man who lives, it's kind of like a dystopian society where there are rules. If somebody wrongs you or does something against you, you have permission to get revenge on that person. If somebody in your family is murdered or killed by another person, you have permission in the society to get revenge by taking another life. And our young man in the story, I'm blanking on his name right now, he loses his brother. His brother gets murdered, and so it's up to him to get revenge for his family. So he heads down in the elevator to go and do that. And as he is going down the elevator, a long way down, there are a few people that come into the elevator as he's making stops because he's at one of the top floors in his building. And he meets some surprising people along the way. And the story starts to change. He starts to interact with these people and talk with them. There are some that he thinks he would have never saw again. And we learn that everything is not quite as it seems. So if you click on the link, you can listen to the first couple chapters because it's poetry in Jason Reynolds' voice. And if you would like to borrow any of these copies, you can, because I have them and we have some in the library as well. So that should be everything for week 3. I know that was a really long video, but because we're starting a new unit, it's pretty lengthy. If you have any questions, specifically my 5th and 6th period, because I was gone on Monday, let me know. But that's all I have, week 3.